Okay. Hi, I am Jeffrey Wernick, and I'm very pleased to have as my guest today Fengsuo Zhou. And I have to say that I don't know him very well. We just met once recently in New York, and we had a wonderful conversation. At least it was from my perspective. I could say that he is the bravest man I've met in my life. And why do I say that? Is because about 35 years ago now, he was one of the student leaders in Tiananmen Square, and he, not figuratively but literally, faced down tanks and faced down the Chinese army that threatened and then did more than threaten and killed a number of the people, mostly students, but people from all walks of life who ended up participating and being engaged in the protest, at Tiananmen Square, that resonated throughout the world and hasn't produced what we hoped, the movement might have produced. I will give a little bit of personal note. I started going to China on a fairly regular basis around 2014, 2015, mostly in the context of meeting somebody who was a successful entrepreneur. He was asking me for an investment advice. I told him I don't give it, but I told him to look into Bitcoin. He became very curious and he started inviting me to China a lot to meet with people to talk about Bitcoin. And my observations is, and I guess I'll wait for Fengsuo to come back.
Okay, sorry.
So my observations are, and then I will turn it over to you. Is when I first went to China and I was meeting a lot of people there. There was a lot. People were talking politics a lot. People were telling me their hope for that Xi Jinping would open up China, and they had high expectations of China being opened and integrating into the rest of the world, and that people were putting a lot of content up on WeChat, and there were all these vibrant communities. I mean, I was only familiar with the communities related to Bitcoin and crypto, but there were a lot of very vibrant communities out there having very vibrant conversations, and it was an interesting place to be, and people were putting up interesting content. WeChat today now looks like a wasteland. These vibrant groups don't exist anymore. People when they can put their moments up, people are keeping almost no moments on, where people used to keep a lot of moments on. Now they don't seem to want to keep a record of any moments on. And what's said on WeChat there is now very stale and significantly less comment. So people no longer feel comfortable with communicating in what I guess was the most prolific channel for communication in social media in the country. I guess WeChat could have seen as the top social media platform in China, and now it seems to me that there might be no social media platform because people don't feel comfortable putting content up on social media platforms in China anymore, which could reflect the fact of they did have hopes of opening up, and now they're responding to a different set of incentives by not putting any content up anymore, or basically innocuous, stale comment up. So that's my observation from an outsider who has now not been to China in about 4 years, maybe even 5 years. So I have some friends that have come and visited me. But they all have one thing in common: they've all established residencies outside of China. So I haven't been able to speak to anybody really who continues to preserve their Chinese residency as their principal place of residence. So why don't with that observation, why don't you let people know? I think for many people who will be watching this, they probably have never had the opportunity of hearing from somebody firsthand who not only was there at Tiananmen Square, but was one of those student leaders, in helping plan, this event, that has intimate knowledge about it, what the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of those who were participating in it, and then we can get to the conversation about what we talked about is the main theme we want to evolve into is this technological panopticon, that exists today in China and seems to be spreading throughout the world.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, you're very kind. I'm humbled by your kind words. I see myself as a fortunate survivor of a brutal massacre and a totalitarian regime. And as a survivor, it's my duty to speak up, especially given that the government is trying to predict everything on the internet and on the ground about what happened in 1989. And this is also the most important sought after topic for Chinese people as soon as they have access through VPN to the free and open internet. So I was a physics student in Tsinghua University in 1989. I was a voracious reader. I read a lot about history, world history, Greek and mythology, history of Rome and history of Europe, United States. And I love by reciting the beautiful speeches, for example, the famous speeches of Gettysburg speech and Declaration of Independence. For me, that's a way to learn English as well as to immerse myself with the culture that's here. It was an eye-opening process for me. I was admitted to Tsinghua University, which is like top university in China, without passing through the required national examination, because I was deemed as one of the top performing students among that year nationally. So that was quite an honor. That I remember at that time the faculty at Tsinghua University. There were many good people who were really within the Communist Party, young, with aspirations for changing China better. I actually talk about Abraham Lincoln when I was being interviewed to get into Tsinghua University. I of course I mentioned Abraham Lincoln as my hero, and think about it, that's like unimaginable today in today's China, but this was in the 80s. That's when the whole country was looking for changes, and especially after Mao's senseless and brutal era of cultural revolution, the party basically lost their coherence on ideology, and that's very important. And internationally, the Soviet Union blocs are on the verge of collapsing, and so that was the background of it. For me, I love doing things from personal level, individual level, grassroots. So my first major work in Tsinghua University was I organized free and independent election at the Department of Physics in Tsinghua University. I didn't realize the significance is until years later when I look, like this was probably the only free and independent election in China ever on college campus. And for me, it was eye-opening experience because democracy, the way people elect leader, even though it's such a minuscule level, empowers people. People feel dignified in the process of being campaigned on, being persuaded to vote. And these candidates are definitely, I mean, they just come into their roles so naturally. Yeah, it's like a big election. We have the campaigning process. We have the speech, and yeah, it worked out perfectly. And we elected a free, independent student union for the first time. And of course, the next year, because this was this beginning of the 88 to 89 school year, and this student union later became the main student leadership body for Tsinghua University, for the whole university, because they were elected differently, and these people naturally were pro-democracy at that time. Yeah, this, to me, I think two important lessons. Democracy is natural for China, and we can do this gradually if we are allowed to, from local level going into higher level. That's why in 1989, during the protest, one of our main demands was democracy in universities. Yeah, we want full-fledged democracy in universities. We don't want Communist Party to be rolling on everything. We want the faculty member to run their own academic agenda. We want the students to be able to voice their own opinion. And of course, for us, we see this as a lab for producing future leaders for democratic China. From campus level. That was our demand. Of course, this was not noticed at that time as much because it's kind of low level. I mean, it compared to the big themes that was going on. But I'm quite proud, of this process. I've been true to this since then. I like working on societies from grassroots level, from individual level, to bring in significant changes. The big theme in 1989, I think, was the demand for freedom of press and disclosure of government officials' assets as a way to fight corruption. I was the first person to go to Tiananmen Square after the death of Hu Yaobang, who was a former leader of the Communist Party. I think today still considered the most open-minded Communist Party leader ever in Communist China history. So his death to us, signaled the death of political change within the Communist Party. And that's how we were triggered. This is very similar to the process if you look at this movie, The Miserables. So that's how
No,
we almost...
essentially, the two main demands you were making at that point in time, to start off pragmatic, which is basically saying you wanted more rights over governance, not at the federal level, but at the university level. So you were not making a threat to the Chinese Communist Party, other than that there should be free speech, and those that had power should expose their assets to show the people that they were not abusing it for their own personal financial gain.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very pragmatic. That's why this was resonating all through China, because even within the government, many people see these demands as necessary and important, and that's why later millions of people came to Tiananmen Square in Beijing alone, and it spread it to hundreds of cities all over China. Of course, the whole world was riveted by this for about 2 months. I was in Berlin for about 2 weeks for the celebration of the fall of Berlin Wall. This year, I work with Axel Springer Freedom Foundation. It's the first time that they acknowledge the contribution of the Tiananmen protest to the fall of Berlin Wall. And I met many East German protesters who were energized by our protest and the brutal massacre. And so most people don't realize the connection between the Tiananmen protest and the fall of Berlin Wall. But for the people who experienced it, it was material. Yeah, the level of protest escalated after Tiananmen massacre in Eastern Europe. That was the
And was
one.
Eastern Europe, was most of those protests also students, or they were
No, that
all
was
society,
more broad-based
broader
in
than just
Eastern
the
Europe.
students?
Yeah, so that could be one reason why it was successful. For example, in Poland, it was led by Solidarity Union.
Yeah,
Actually,
Lech Walesa, yes.
yeah, I actually met one of the leaders there while I was in Berlin. Actually, there's one triumph on that day that's also significant for the world. This was the victory of the Solidarity Union through election
Yes.
over communism. On June 4, exactly the same day. But so I always have this question, like whether the Tiananmen massacre impacted the result of the election in Poland, because it happened on like exactly the same day. If you look, they all called on June 4. But in reality, there is a significant lead and a lag, because the massacre, what we call Tiananmen massacre, even though now we commemorate on June 4, we call it June 4 massacre. It started in the evening of June 3rd. People were killed, I think officially confirmed as early as 9 p.m. in the evening. And that was like 2 p.m. in Poland. And I actually met a student protester. She told me that Polish people knew Tiananmen Square massacre when they were voting. Because it was widely broadcasted, and even though at that time the government, still communist government, Solidarity Union has their own publications to broadcast what's going on, and so I think this the first time I think I can confirm that when people were voting, they knew of the Tiananmen massacre. It definitely had an impact on this election as well, because the election result was big surprise win for the Solidarity Union. People rejected communism. So I think these are very important lessons. So if we look at from international perspective, the Tiananmen protest has significant impact in the world till today, like how it is today. And another thing later I realized is that it actually has a significant impact in Taiwan, which now is like the most vibrant liberal democracy in Asia now. Of course, it's a thorn in the eye of Xi Jinping now, just because it shines so bright as a beacon of freedom. Because the 7 months after Tiananmen massacre, there was a student-led protest in Taiwan that significantly shift the power from the military to the civil leader Li Denghui, who later transformed Taiwan with skill and political acumen. But for him, this was a pivotal point, the student protest, which was inspired by the Tiananmen protest. Yeah, so I just want to say this because most people don't realize this. Of course, at that time, why the world was watching, because it was surprising. Like everything escalated very quickly. From the first day I was there, like there were people watching, and then a courageous journalist reported our action on a national newspaper, and it became national news. And the second day, thousands of people came, and the next day, tens of thousands, and that's how people quickly come out. This was mainly the contribution of Peking University, our rivalry in Tsinghua. But I think they were much better in 1989 in terms of organizing the protest. They proposed this called petition of 7 demands, 七点要求 So that's how these two requests. First, they were two most important ones of the seven that became known. This was 3 days after his Hu Yaobang's death, and it was also very peaceful. Yeah, we were able to basically self-govern on Tiananmen Square for 3 weeks before the crackdown. There wasn't even a traffic accident on Tiananmen Square, even though at times it could be very chaotic because over 1 million people would come in and out, and we have to coordinate, for example, the ambulance through this sea of people because there were so many students on hunger strikes, over 1,000, and we have to make sure they are provided with necessary medical service. Yeah, we did everything. It was an amazing moment just to realize, the government was completely away, but we did everything, this civil society on Tiananmen Square.
Yeah,
For me,
can you tell us about the negotiations that were going on? Was anybody in the government willing to sit down with the student leaders? What was going on during this process where you have these protests, very peaceful process, civil, peaceful protests with very specific, limited demands that would have not necessarily put at risk the existing form of government, only would have exposed those under that form of government who were behaving in a corrupt fashion. So it was only a threat to those who are corrupt, not a threat to the whole system. Unless everybody involved in the system was corrupt, then it's a threat to everyone involved if they're all corrupt. So
exactly.
so
Now,
so you have these specific demands. Anybody from the government sitting down, Deng Xiaoping sent somebody and say, okay, this I'll accept, this I won't accept. How do we have a dialogue, or were they just waiting to fight a war of attrition, hoping that after a period of time you would just abandon the protests, thinking that they were futile and you'd give up? What was going on at that time?
Oh, thank you. That's a very good question. For this, I suggest a book. This is a very good book, just published within last couple of years. I think one of the best research into this is called "The Fatal Decision in Beijing" by Professor Su Yang. He is a professor at UC Irvine. This is one of the books to answer this question in detail. But to summarize, it's very simple. Deng Xiaoping, who was always a cold-blooded killer, even though he later was branded as a reformer. He sees this as a threat from the very beginning. I remember he specifically said that students will be killed if they kept going on with the protest, and this was April 25th, and this was 10 days after the death of Hu Yaobang. This was way before there was this occupation of Tiananmen Square and everything else. Why he made this decision? Because he was able to. Most people don't realize, even though a lot was happening, Deng was ruling China like an emperor. And he made this decision without going through any formal process, pretty much all by himself, probably with some consultation with his own family only. Mm-hmm. And then he gave out this order to carry out, to Li Peng, who was seen as the second person, a butcher of Beijing. But in reality, I think Li Peng later published his own diary called Diary of Li Peng. This is widely available now. I think largely the facts are probably right in Li Peng's diary. He basically extricated himself from the main decision-making process. He basically saying like he was just meticulously carrying out the orders of Deng Xiaoping. And similar for Zhao Ziyang, even though he was from the opposite direction, he wasn't consulted at all, even though he was the nominal leader of Communist Party and supposed to be leader of the nation. But he wasn't involved in the decision making. But when Deng handed down this order of using troops to declare martial law, he rejected. He voted against it. This was, to his credit, very unusual in the communist system. But on the other hand, he was supposed to be leader of the country and of the party. He could have been more vocal, stronger. That would change history, but he didn't. He was blinded by his personal loyalty to Deng Xiaoping. But why Deng Xiaoping made this decision? There are many reasons we don't really know. I think this probably is like the last gap in the research into how this really happened. For example, there's no official record of where Deng Xiaoping is between April 25th, when he declared that he wants to use troops to kill, to May 11th, when he showed up. He was readily prepared for the massacre already. We don't really know what happened because they are still keeping top secret on this. But what Deng Xiaoping and what Zhao Ziyang and Li Peng did, it's pretty clear in their memoir diary. It's pretty clear. So Deng made this decision very early on. And why? I think recent years I have some clue about this. Also, a lot of it is international. For example, most people don't realize there was a protest and a massive killing in Georgia in April 9. Yeah, they used tanks to crack down a protest in similar fashion. And Deng, he is always very much alarmed by this. He followed what happens to the Eastern Bloc, other sources very closely, and he was one of the strongest supporter of using tanks from, for example, in Hungary in 1955, I believe, and in Czech in 1968. So that's basically his playbook. So there's no surprise of using hundreds of tanks to conquer Beijing. Basically, it's like a military occupation, and that's what he did. So just to, I hope this answers your question. How this made, yeah.
And I've seen, I saw the videos that you sent me, and one of them you mentioned, and probably in more than one place, about the fact that the U.S. subsequent to the violence, and George Bush was president at the time, the father,
Yes,
he basically reached out to Xi Jinping after, and not with a package of sanctions or anything like that, but actually expressed support for the government.
yes.
How is that for you? As a student, you're reading the Declaration of Independence. You're citing Abraham Lincoln. You have maybe these hopes and dreams that you want to be like the United States, and the United States is a beacon and a role model for democracy. And then the students are reflecting the same type of the people out there are the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, people out there who wanted to support the ideal of what the American ideal was as espoused in the Declaration of Independence. And then you get supposedly the pillar of democracy in the world, not supporting the students, but supporting how surprised were you, and how demoralizing, if it was at all, to many of the people who participated in the protests, just to get essentially no support, even moral support, from the U.S. government at that point in time?
Yeah, this, of course, to me, I didn't know about this. I was put on most of wanted list. I was in Qincheng prison. when we heard the news that Bush sent his special envoy Scowcroft to Beijing. We didn't know the content until recent years when it was released. And that's what really happened there. And of course, this is a betrayal of the freedom-loving people of China. And for United States, I think it's probably the worst mistake ever to choose to embrace this brutal regime, even though its its true color was on display.
In your time in the U.S., have you had a chance to meet with people who were inside the Bush administration at the time, where you said to them, hey, can you tell me your thought process on this? Have you been able to get an explanation from anyone in the U.S. government regarding their thought process, why the U.S. thought process was, and why Bush did what he did?
I have no idea. Yeah, I can only guess from outside. I have talked to many people in the diplomat circle. It's very disappointing. I mean, most of them live in a bubble. This bubble of false hope. It's some kind of fantasy world they live in. Because it's pretty clear this is an enemy of United States, but the most of these diplomats, they take a great pride in helping China growing and keeping peace. Yeah, that's their claim. But I think for United States to partner with such a regime is self-destructive. As I said many times at U.S. Congress. And that's basically it. They have empowered this regime to become what it is today. Whereas, for example, in Georgia, there is actually a boulevard named for Bush because he supported the democracy process in Georgia. But in China, he chose to support Deng Xiaoping. I recently watched a documentary. Like this was a few days after Tiananmen massacre. He refused to condemn them for the massacre. Just think about it. Bush himself. So this is just completely beyond my comprehension that United States would do this. This didn't go away with even the recent more confrontational approach started by Trump. For example, last year, June 4, 2023, on this day, exactly this day, U.S. government sent a special envoy to Beijing because Biden was so desperate trying to get China to talk to United States. Because this time there were many, for example, there was balloon, everything, remember the balloon?
Yes, I remember the balloon. Yes,
the spy balloon. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's supposed to, kind of botched, to have botched the effort of Biden trying to, appease to Xi Jinping. So he tried something really, I condemn, I have to condemn openly that they sent someone on that day, to kowtow to Beijing. Basically, Beijing chose this day for a reason. And, they happily, eagerly cooperated. And when asked by the journalists, and the State Department come out and saying, it's just a day. For us, this is the insult by U.S. government to the freedom-loving people of China, and this keeps happening.
What were your thoughts about, like, at the time? And I look at things from both the philosophical point of view and from the economic point of view. And like when Trump was actively engaged in negotiations with Xi Jinping on a trade deal, From an economic sense, I think that would have been that might have been good for the U.S. if China had bought all the things that China had committed it would buy. But China, that was not really a deal where China was opening up, and it was a deal where basically the China's public sector would have got stronger because the customer was going to be the Chinese government.
Exactly.
So it was the Chinese government buying stuff. So it was not a matter of building freedom and further capitalism in China, but it was actually making the government stronger by that process. And in return, Trump would have gotten a reduction in deficit, and China would have had a stronger central government because it would have been because prior to that, the private sector was growing relative to the public sector, and that trade deal that Trump negotiated actually would have had the Chinese public sector grow at the expense of Chinese private sector. So China, the only problem Trump seemed to want to have was to reduce the trade deficit, and he was willing to have a smaller private sector and a larger public sector in China in return for having a smaller, trade deficit, which probably China was never going to comply with its obligations anyway. So if you were advising the Trump administration at that point in time, what would you have been telling them, that in order to advance, the long-term interest for the Chinese people, what should be the U.S. policy of how to constructively engage in China where they're concerned about the Chinese people?
Yeah, I think for now, it's probably kind of too late now with everything, entangled so deeply, so widely everywhere. This is much bigger, enemy to deal with now. The every issue is very complicated. For example, I was released about a year later after the massacre, to my own surprise, because of international pressure, because it was the next year, about a year after, it was the time that U.S. Congress would debate on whether to grant communist China with the most favored nation treat status. And that's why, they release a bunch of people just to show they have some action, and that then Bush can tell the Congress, they have done this, done that, so they can pass. So this was the norm in the early 90s. And then Clinton removed this link of human rights with trade. And in 2000, China was allowed to join WTO with very little will to carry out what really the promise. If you look today, looking back at what they promised like 20 years ago when they joined WTO, most of these were lies. But they allow this China to join this, basically giving them a huge advantage. I think for Wall Street, of course, the benefit overall is basically lower inflation, lower labor cost, which they happily enjoy. But on the other hand, I think, because there's no protection of private property, truly everything belongs to the government, even though, this, at times you can see some very successful private enterprise. You think about Jack Ma, he's one of the most innovative entrepreneur in China, in the world. And where is he today? He would be happy just to be spared of his own life. That's the situation. In this kind of system, we are dealing not with individual companies or business. We are dealing with the state, and everything serves the purpose of the state. I think that's the true nature of trade with China. And United States must be very clear on this, and no illusion at all.
Yeah, I had my impression was, again, from an outsider who got to meet a lot of people, but again, I'm certainly an outsider, not an insider. But my impression was, given what I had learned in limited experience that I had, during those years where I was making very frequent trips is that I basically thought that every private sector company was an extension of the Chinese government, because the activities that they were engaging in because it's what the government wanted them to do. So how the allocation of capital in the private sector is basically driven by the public sector.
Exactly.
And so I think the term that you used in our call the other day was state capitalism. So this is the battle basically between China's rejected communism and has embraced state capitalism, and a very aggressive form of state capitalism. In competition with our social democratic capitalism. So
Exactly.
so this is really a strong you and I both went to University of Chicago. So
Right.
We're all familiar that there was this famous guy, Milton Friedman. Friedman, he wrote this book, Capitalism and Freedom. And basically, the Chinese are basically saying, no, you can have capitalism without political freedom. And, they want to prove the fact is that you can actually have capitalism without political freedom. So, because you can have state-run capitalism. And right now, the argument that Xi Jinping is making throughout the world in recruiting countries to be part of the BRICS is state capitalism works better than social democratic capitalism. Is that kind of like a fair summary of the struggle that we have today between the superpowers?
Yeah, it's a brilliant summary. Yes, definitely. Actually, talking about Milton Friedman, I first knew about his name in 1989. Guess why? Because Zhao Ziyang, the party secretary, met him before his removal in Tiananmen's protests. Yeah, this was one of his last image of meeting with the champion of free market economy, Milton Friedman. It was actually listed as one of his crimes. Saying like he's advocating Western style capitalism, free market capitalism. If we see how China it is today, and why it chooses a different path, this is partially one answer. They are definitely against the truly free market capitalism as proposed by Milton Friedman. This.
What do you think Xi Jinping's, when I met with people, I met a lot of very smart people, and they were convinced. I assume they were convinced. I assume they were being sincere with me in saying that they had all these hopes and dreams of China being opened, and that you saw all these vibrant conversations in WeChat, and then now WeChat's now a wasteland and nobody has these hopes. So did Xi Jinping change? Or were people projecting their hopes onto a Xi Jinping that they should have never did, because he's basically the person he's always been? So what do you think has happened? In China in these last several years, when there was this hope for this openness and there was all these vibrant communications, and now that's all disappeared.
Well, of course, there's lots of hope because Chinese people are very innovative, hardworking. They would jump at every opportunity to make new things, and sometimes with material impact on political issues. For example, when WeChat was in its earlier years, it was actually a very good platform, even for political discussion. We have groups of civil society organizations on WeChat. I was actually able to speak on WeChat to like over 10,000 people simultaneously on WeChat. This was 2016 actually, of course, CCP saw this as a threat because people are organizing. They are learning things. They are talking to each other. they see their true opinion. But on the other hand, I believe it's a misconception that United States and democratic countries see Xi Jinping as an outlier. He wasn't. He isn't an outlier. This is his true color. Of course, the trajectory was set in 1989 because any true reformers within the party were purged with the.
So do you think this period of time where people thought they were open was a period of time where he had to accept it because he hadn't consolidated enough power, and that he couldn't be who he really wanted to be until he consolidated the power he needed to be to govern the way he wanted to govern?
Exactly. I think there were lots of wishful thinking into this. For us, it's very clear. Actually, the change in China's attitude, toward openness and rule of law actually happened before Xi officially took over. Even, the real year for this was 2008. Actually, when they held the Olympics, when Bush, even attended the opening ceremony. And this was the time, I guess in the United States was happening. This was a financial crisis. And then to the communist insiders, this was a moment of what they call, the basically the decline, the demise of the West, and the rise of the East, as represented by communist China. So I think Xi is their chosen person for this reason. He was always very diligent, meticulous follower of the party's indoctrination, and he shows this. Even I think as early as 2012, there was this fight. Remember Bo Xilai? That he was another famous princeling. He was actually even more famous than Xi Jinping at that time. But he was disgraced at that time. Some people believe that he was disgraced by Xi Jinping. It's actually not the truth. The truth is that these the other group within the CCP, this youth league group, I think that the main plotter behind this was Ling Jihua. He's in prison now, and his whole family wiped out. Basically, he has some surviving brothers in the United States. That's what happened to him. He was kind of organizing some kind of plot against Bo Xilai and Xi Jinping, but he lost. And anyway, that's just one kind of episode there. But when Xi took over power, I think there were lots of wishful thinking. Even United States, I think, made a very bad decision at that time. There was this very famous police in China, Wang Lijun. He was a top aide of Bo Xilai in Chongqing. He defected to the U.S. consulate in Chengdu. But the United States chose to reject him because they believe he would be an ally. This decision was made, I think, by Biden himself, because he was interfering more, I think, on the China-related issues, because he traveled with Xi many times and supposed to know him. And I think this is unconfirmed. There's one quote saying that we would have to give Xi Jinping a chance. Why? Because if China allow Wang Lijun you can search this later. This happened 2012, early 2012. This was the highest level defection in last 12 years. A minister level policeman defected. He carried with him lots of secrets, of course, but the United States rejected him, and because they do not want to see the CCP regime being weakened. This was a great opportunity because at that time there was this big fight within communist regime between these different groups, especially because the succession. This is always the weakest link in this kind of regime. Yeah, and then she was facing serious challenge. But the United States chose to strengthen Xi by rejecting this defector. This was one episode of it. At that time, I think I had this is one of my best comment on political issues. I said both Xi Jinping and Bo Xilai, who was disgraced, they were children of Mao. They grew up in Mao's era. They will be Mao's child politically. It doesn't matter who their own father is. Their father, political father, is Mao. Why I say that? Because Xi Jinping's father was widely considered as a reformer within Communist Party. I think probably forcefully. I don't think it's true, but he had this reputation of being a reformer. So most people kind of projected their own hope into Xi Jinping without looking at the reality. That's basically what Xi is now. He wants to be a Mao number 2, 2.0, and with bigger influence globally, and maybe, like higher status posthumously. I think this is why he's dangerous now. He has global ambition, and he feels like he has enough resource to do it, to challenge the hegemony of United States and with it the current role-based international order.
And what's your opinion of I have some in speaking to people about Miles Kwok, Guo Wengu.
Right.
I'm not sure if he's a real dissident living in the U.S. or because he's been the backer of Bannon. So and Bannon is people can like him or dislike him, but Bannon is an agent of chaos. People can say an agent of chaos of good or an agent of chaos bad. That's everybody's perspective, but he's definitely an agent of chaos. Significant amount of change. So. They always say that someone wants to weaken the United States. The best way to weaken the United States is the promotion of chaos, division in the people. The more people are divided, divide and conquer. That's still the best way. Encouraging internal dissension is the best way to weaken somebody. So,
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm curious. The fact is, is he really, a dissident, or is he pretending to be a dissident? And he's financing agents of chaos here, who might be successful at scaling up as an agent of chaos, and therefore, even if Steve Bannon, even if he's promoting a quote anti-China position, the point of it is that's irrelevant. What he's promoting is more internal dissension and division in the country that weakens the country. So. Do you have an opinion on that? I mean, I'm not really sure he's a legitimate, dissident, or he's a plant. And maybe you.
Well, for me, I think I would only say, I don't have any contact with him. For me, my instinct is to stay away as much as possible. For the things that I'm doing, because I just can't be sure of his intention and his background. That's my position.
Bannon once invited me to meet him, and I said no. I wanted to stay also like you. I wanted to say, I didn't have enough confidence that I wanted to meet this guy. So I definitely didn't want to have any interaction, with him at all. I found Bannon to be an interesting character. He's a smart person. He's an entertaining person to be with. He's really highly intelligent. We ideologically we're aligned in some areas and not aligned in other areas. But I was never really sure, and I told him once, as I said, I don't know if this guy's a real dissident or you're an useful idiot on his behalf, because ultimately what you're promoting is, dissension that they might make America weaker. And their goal is they don't care what you say about China as long as what you're doing is making America more divided. Then basically America becomes less of a threat to China the more America is divided and with respect to its own problems. So America looking inward, not outward, is an opportunity for China to expand itself outward. So that's my opinion, but it's just speculation. I don't know what you think about
for me, similarly, I think we have a similar stance on this. I think you were prudent to judge it, because it's very difficult to confirm, really what he's saying, especially considered his background. He worked with very high-level MSS agent. He even I think the name of the guy is Ma Jian. He was supposedly to be basically the leader of the MSS, the true leader. Because Changwu, that means he was in charge of the running, basically the non-political side of MSS. Meaning this political meaning, the party politics. So it's a very intriguing question for me, which I have no clue, basically, now to gauge into. So I think, my position is to stay away as much possible.
With respect to the technological panopticon, which I think is the biggest threat to free people everywhere in the world. Do you think now it would be more difficult to even organize a Tiananmen Square, because it's almost impossible to organize an event of this scale without the government knowing exactly what's going on and who to persecute and who to imprison before it actually occurs? And so is it becoming more and more difficult for people to engage in activities that are dissenting because of the level of how people are monitored and communications between people, and in any environment of groups? I mean, I know China is more aggressive than the U.S. is, in the sense that there are a lot of the apps that are available in the U.S. in the App Store here for encrypted communication, don't really exist in China, except for the people that have VPNs. But even then, it's still a challenge for the use of the VPNs. For people to get used to being able to use, for some of my friends in China have periodic access to Telegram. They seem to have almost no access to Signal. So, so to the extent that there is any form of encrypted communication, the Chinese government right now is much more aggressive at eliminating as much encrypted communication as possible, and then monitoring everything else that's not encrypted. Is that, so can you describe better than I can, what the technological panopticon looks like in China today?
I think for people in China, even though they are so accustomed to being monitored, being surveillanced on, during the pandemic, I think they experienced the true extent of how pervasive, how brutal it can be. For example, in Shanghai, for I think more than a month, everyone, including the most wealthy class of China, are locked down in their own home. this was done precisely because China has this kind of technology that enables them to do it. Sometimes they would even deploy like a digital lock on your home, and you can't go out, and they can monitor your everything. And in terms of surveillance, they can monitor anyone, anytime, anywhere. And even more so, they deploy so much state resource into it. I guess lots of talented engineers to do it. There's one idea I think that's alarming is that they can monitor, for example, your association with people who like it's like, for example, you carry a bubble with you, not only you yourself, but you, for example, you have a moving window in terms of like time is they can set it, for example, to 15 minutes. So anybody that's within, for example, 50 meter of you within last 15 minutes, this bubble, imagine this bubble, and they can monitor this bubble about you, yeah, everywhere. And that's how they detect, for example, the potential for transmission of the virus and some things. Most people just don't realize how crazy this is. It's not only personal level. Think about it. So this would kind of map out any even potential like you associate with anyone, like anyone who come into this bubble will be monitored. If they believe you are, for example, agent of change or agent of virus, it's the same thing.
Right.
And yeah, so they use drones, for example, to follow people, to monitor people, to broadcast their message. Actually, one of my favorite is that they use drones to warn people in Shanghai not to go out. They said, restrict your curiosity and your urge for freedom. And that's literally what it was broadcasted. Stay home, stay safe. And yeah, of course, for the terrorists, this looks like extreme. You can control people to such a minuscule, like such a degree. There's like no chance for resistance, basically. Yeah. And of course, comes with it, there are lots of exceptions, back windows for the privileged people. Right. But for the people who do not belong to this class, even though in Shanghai, many people were starved to death. Just think about it. Not because there wasn't enough food. It's just because people are controlled to such a degree, they cannot really tell other people what's going on. Just because everything is so restricted. So even though you are starving, you can't cry out. That's why people will starve to death. The worst human-made catastrophe ever in human history was in China. This is during Mao's era, the 1960 famine. Between 30 million to 40 million Chinese people were starved to death, basically by design. Yeah, they do not allow people to leave, for example, when there's food, because that would give people a bad impression. Yeah, things are out of control. They do not want that, and they do not allow journalists to report it, and they do not allow civil society organizations to investigate, to help. And that's why starvations in such a scale happen. And this the same thing repeated in Shanghai. And that's what was happening. Yeah, think about it. Between Shanghai, in 2022, and China under Mao in 1960, a lot has happened. This a lot has changed, happened. But the true nature of this regime, the way people were ruled, hasn't. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge we are facing now. In a way, I think I always say this. I'm in San Francisco Bay Area now. I was at Stanford a few days ago. I gave a speech at Stanford weeks ago, I encourage these smart people of Stanford to come out with a technology solution against this firewall. Yeah. I was there at the celebration of Berlin Wall. I can't help think about this great firewall of China. It's a challenge to human dignity. You think about it. It's basically enslaving Chinese people to this prison. It's not physical now. It's more in their mind, in their thinking, and that's
Which is even
something.
worse. Which is
Yeah,
even worse.
exactly. Even worse. And it's the also it's not only limited to China, because they use this as uh, a base for their projection of their own ideas everywhere globally now. And so I think this is, to me, the biggest challenge that we are all facing. Because for the rulers, for people who are thirst for power, this is like the best way, once you are in power, to control people. Like there's no dissenting voice at all. But of course, for now, I don't really have an answer. My answer is in my belief in human nature. I believe it's in human nature that everyone deserves dignity, freedom. And it's in human nature that we want to fight against tyranny, dictatorship. And I believe eventually things will change, even though for now, it seems that it's like insurmountable, this war. No, it's definitely very dark, but we are seeing hopes. Even though sometimes it seems to be just candlelight, versus like a lighthouse that we want to see. But there are hopes. For example, even though VPNs are so difficult, I believe at least about 30 million users from China. I think it's probably more like 50 million now that you use VPN, for free, truthful information on everything. And with this, there is a vibrant Chinese community on internet now. And it is our Tiananmen Square, where we can exchange opinions on many issues. Even though it seems chaotic, but there is freedom of expression. And people can tell, for example, what's happening in China. For example, a few days ago, there's this senseless killing. It's probably a revenge killing of some kind. More than 30 people by official account were dead, and many more were injured. But for now, for example, if you search, you wouldn't see it in the headline, whatever, anywhere in China. If you search for this specifically, they are trying to erase it from public memory. And of course, more importantly, like what happened 2 years ago during the pandemic, like now they are erasing it. But with this community outside of China, we have records, of what's going on, and it's spread out, and that's why for the middle class in China, they want this kind of information. They want to know what really is going on. And when there is a political crisis, this public forum will become powerful. 2 years ago, there was this white paper protest, and that spread it out to dozens of cities in China, eventually forced Xi Jinping to change his policy, completely in a complete reversal. This was first time that public protest forced CCP to change their position, even though they wouldn't acknowledge it. And this was done despite, the surveillance, the firewall, and all that. And because people were organizing themselves through this public forum that's outside of China now.
Right.
Yeah. And I think this is very important. That's why a lot of my work is in this area too. Yeah.
Can you explain to people from your perspective, what is the importance to the Chinese government and to many Chinese people of what the significance is of Taiwan and the One China policy?
Well, yeah, I've been in Taiwan many times. This January, I brought with me a group of young activists to China, from China to Taiwan, to observe the election. And this was such emotional moment. Some people were in tears just watching people counting votes, because it's Chinese-speaking democracy. Yeah, for me, this it's similar feeling like I was 36 years ago in Tsinghua. People voting. It's empowering. It's dignifying Chinese people. I think that's what Taiwan is. It's a Chinese-speaking democracy. It's very inspiring, and it shows what a different China could be. So I think it's definitely United States' best interest, and with it duty as the order keeper of the world, to keep Taiwan free and safe from invasion. I believe the United States should be very clear on defending Taiwan at the first moment whenever there is invasion. And I actually advocate that United States should recognize Taiwan and establish full diplomatic relationship with Taiwan immediately. There are precedents in this. East Germany, West Germany, North Korea, South Korea. Why not Taiwan? I think this is a self-limiting rule that's created by Kissinger and his followers. That's detrimental to the interest of United States, and it has been followed blindly, with this one China talk, blah blah, all that garbage. That's my position on Taiwan.
Well, it seems to me in this case, the Biden administrator was a stronger supporter of a strong Taiwan than the Trump administration has been. Trump wants to cut a deal. So to the extent that he wants to cut a deal, is there much of a deal that can be cut with China without the U.S. making concessions with respect to Taiwan? Will they get much of a deal with Xi Jinping if they don't make concessions with respect to Taiwan? Do you think that's likely?
No way. Any ambiguity on this invites Xi Jinping's invasion. It will create more problem for United States if Xi Jinping believes that there's a chance that the United States will cut a deal.
What do you think? What do you think is the? And I know this is just asking you to speculate. What do you think is Xi Jinping? Again, just your speculation on what's his red line with respect to what would be the U.S. behavior that would trigger Chinese to use force to recapture Taiwan militarily. Do you think that Xi Jinping has a red line on what would trigger, military action?
We can only see this from official declarations. There, I think, so-called red line is like the independence of Taiwan. If Taiwan declare independence, but that's actually a false claim, because Taiwan has been independent,
right,
for reality. It is a different legitimate country, basically. If you think about it.
I mean, would you be concerned if Trump went out and said, I'm going to put 100% tariffs on China and I'm going to try and starve the Chinese economy with tariffs and isolating it? what do you think the type of actions would be that would finally have China say,
That would definitely be a welcome sign for Xi Jinping. The motto of CCP is at any cost. Yeah. So cost of human lives, it doesn't matter. I mean, how would 100% tariff means anything for Xi Jinping? That's definitely an invitation for disaster. I hope the smart person like Mark Rubio will make this better decision on this. But on the other hand, I think Trump is famous for making kind of statements that's really just not meaningful. So I would only hope so. But I think this is not a good time for United States to show any indecisive, any ambiguity on Taiwan. I think United States should be very clear on Taiwan. We should establish full diplomatic relationship with Taiwan, and leaving whether China can unify with Taiwan to the people of Taiwan and people of China to decide in the future.
Through the electoral process.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's one question here from the audience. I'll read it to you. WeChat is the everything app in China. Elon Musk has said that he wants to make X the everything app in the US. How important is such an app to the CCP to have such an app and giving it the ability to control such a large population? Do you think an American everything app would be similarly used by the American state if Musk should ever achieve his goal?
Well, of course, it just on the WeChat in China, this is definitely a preferred tool for CCP because it has everything. It's just so powerful, except that it doesn't really empower people. For example, there are many functions on WeChat that can basically change the communication of people quite significant. For example, if they allow the moments to be searchable, for now you can't really see other people's moments, right? If they allow the moments to be searchable, you can see others, you can follow, comment. It can be much more powerful than today, and that's restricted for political reasons. And the limitation on group, for example, to 500. And I was saying that I gave speech to about like 10,000 people simultaneously. How they did it? Because people come out with this layered groups idea. They can bypass it, but there's huge potential with this, and that was specifically restricted because they do not want to empower people to talk to each other. They want people to be limited, like in a cage where they are watched, from the top, like a panopticon kind of situation. And WeChat is a perfect tool for that. And for United States, I think the risk is direct and immediate because WeChat is much more powerful than TikTok. Just because it's also inclusive, and there are a significant number of people using this in the United States. You basically carry it like a spying device with you, and for example, for Chinese to live in New York City, in Los Angeles, you can just use WeChat for everything now. Living in the United States, you do not have to use anything else. You can live in the United States years and years because it has everything in it already. Think about it. That's basically an extension of CCP's rule in the United States. That's already happened. That's why I always advocate banning WeChat immediately. And this one thing that Trump did really well. He stated a ban on WeChat. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But if he's truly into this, now I think because of the recent law change, can just sign executive order banning WeChat as an app owned by a foreign adversary. That's it. He can do it. I hope he does it because it's so invasive now and so powerful in United States already. What's the other question?
Yeah, the question was, do you think an American everything app would similarly be used by the American state if Musk should ever achieve his goal? So do you think that the US government would use all the data if there was an everything app in a similar way that the Chinese government uses the data?
Well, I'm less concerned about it. This country of creative destruction. I hope we will bypass this in some new innovation that will come out. So people will not be stuck with this kind of app. Of course, in principle, we love check and balance. We love individual ownership of things, and I don't think I wouldn't want this kind of app in United States, no matter how convenient, powerful it will be.
Yes, I think when you aggregate information and make it easy, accessible to the government will want it, and they won't want it for good purposes. They'll want it for bad purposes. They won't use the data to protect us. They'll use the data to empower themselves, and look to enslave us more and control us more. So it'll be used for propaganda. It'll be used for control. It'll be used for surveillance. I think the surveillance state in the United States, will probably. This is my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion, but I think that eventually, meaning in the next 10, 20 years, the surveillance states in the United States will not be much different than the surveillance state in China. So the government, the government is only looking to get more information from people, and only looking to extend and expand surveillance, and looking to be able to do it without needing any warrants whatsoever. So the government wants to be able to do warrantless surveillance of the people, and the people don't seem to be willing to. You said to have a system of checks and balances. Ultimately, the check and balance is we the people. So if we the people refuse to provide that check and balance, then there'll be no check and balance. So we can't rely upon the government doing it on our behalf. We have to do it ourselves.
Exactly. I mean, for a while there was a lot of hope on blockchain technology to bring some new things around, but there I think it has come and passed. We haven't really seen any concrete development.
When there was when there was a vote for the extension of the Pfizer ruling a little less than a year ago, and this, they made some quote reforms, but ultimately the reforms were not very protective of people's privacy rights. I tried to get, I wrote some stuff. I submitted it to people in the media. I spoke to people on other platforms. I tried to get a movement of people, to cooperate to fight this effort. And I wasn't looking to lead the effort. So I said, look, I want to be involved in this. I don't need to be the leader of it. Even if I'm calling you, you can be the face of it. I don't need to be the face of it. I don't want to be the face of it. So I just want something done. So I said, look, if you agree with me that something needs to get done, and we got to say, stop, we're not tolerating this. Don't renew this Pfizer courts, in a way, the Pfizer ruling that lets this sort of warrantless surveillance of the American people. And we say we have had enough. We got to organize and say we've had enough. Write editorials, do some stuff. Promote yourself for doing it. You don't have to promote me. You don't have to ever mention my name. Let's just try and do something to speak out against this. I could find no one that was willing to speak out in support of this. So for whatever reason, people decided to be silent on it. So ultimately, if people decide to be silent on these issues, this is what you get. This stuff happens. Many people don't even know it happens because the people who are supposed to tell them that this stuff is happening don't really want to talk about it. So I was really very, very disappointed because I put a lot of effort, into trying to get people to speak out, on this issue and on another issue like called the third party doctrine, where if you have to share information, with a third party because it's required, by that third party or by the government is asking you to collect this information, then since you've shared it with this third party, it's basically like sharing it with the world because if the government wants to get it, well, it's not really with the world, only with the government. I mean, this is like a perverse thing. You have a third party doctrine that says if I share information, if AT&T or Chase Manhattan or JP Morgan Bank or Goldman Sachs, whatever, I open up an account, I give information to them, and suddenly because I've shared information with them, that now the government says I put it in the public domain for their benefit. It's not like you can call up and say, hey, Goldman Sachs, give me all the information on Jeffrey Wernick, but the government can call up Goldman Sachs and say, give me all the information. So it's a perverse definition of what's in the public domain, because in the public domain, everyone has access to it. So
Right.
if only the government has access to the information without a warrant, then it's not really in the public domain. So it's this horrible definition of what's in the public domain because it's not really in the public domain. It's in a special domain that only the government has access to it. So it's not private, nor is it public. So it's this weird hybrid that only works for the benefit of the government, but for the courts to say that essentially it's in the public domain. No, if it's in the public domain, everybody would have access to the information, and they don't. Only the government has access to the information, not everybody else. I can't call up all these third parties and say, give me the information on every single person I know who shared information with you, because it's in the public domain. The companies will say no to me, but they say yes to the government, and people decided that they didn't want to speak up, on these issues. So ultimately, yes, we have a system of checks and balances, but ultimately we have to be that check. We can't delegate that check out to somebody else because if that party doesn't do the checking on our behalf, then we got to check on our own behalf. And I always think it's anything that's important to you. You don't designate an agent that you don't have complete control over, to represent your interests. If I have a lawyer and I tell the lawyer, this is what you got to do, you're my agent, they'll do what I tell them, instruct them to do. Okay. When I have a politician, I can make a suggestion that they can completely ignore. And the only way they'll pay attention is if I get a whole mob of people to go to them and say, this is what we expect you to do, or we're going to kick you out of office. So, but it's not like every taxpayer can go to their congressperson and say, I want you to do this on my behalf. And they'll laugh at you unless you have a mob or you have, Elon Musk money to basically singly support their next campaign for office. So ultimately, that you just get ignored. So I think that's just the lesson that too many people forget, is that the only real check and balance the system has ultimately is we're the ultimate check. And if we delegate that to some third party that's unreliable at doing that, then shame on us for doing so, which is basically, I think, what we've done. And I think, what the experiences that you've talked about, if you talk about the risks, you and the people who were there with you, I mean, they were risking their lives the same way the people who signed the Declaration of Independence were risking their lives, and they understood that they weren't going to rely upon an agent, to do this on their behalf. They went out there and they were on the streets in the square, and to your credit and to credit everybody was there, is the fact is that the inspiration, that image that they had, the image of Tank Man, with the tank in front, is something that resonated throughout the world, and apparently, as you've discussed so well, has inspired other movements out there, and hopefully will continue to be, a reminder of and an inspiration for people that, yeah, it's a risk to stand up, it's a risk to speak out, but it's also a risk just to do nothing. So
Thank you. Very well put. Yes. Yes. I think most people probably not aware of the things that we are exposed to in this country. Yeah, to me, I think it's worrying that a lot of the new technology and the way that it's going on, it's very centralized, and it's not really kind of empowering individual, or people feel kind of lost in this cyber world, and powerless. Yeah, that's not an ideal situation. Yeah, we should definitely fight for our rights. Yeah.
Yes. So what would be, I always like to give my guests the last word. So what are the things that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you that you'd like to talk about that you didn't get an opportunity to speak about? And what's the last message that you'd like to convey to all the people who will watch our conversation?
Well, this is from my own viewpoint. I think that, China, it's very important issue now facing everyone, both as a significant geographic risk and a challenge to the world order that we enjoy living in. And I hope more people can help change this by hoping by helping people who are fighting for a democratic China, which can be a much better source than current China for peace and prosperity. And it's very important. And for me, it's an honor to be out there doing this, and I hope more people can join us.
How can people help? How can people be in contact with you? How can they be familiar with the work that you're doing, with the organizations you're doing, with the content you're providing, so people can be more educated and informed on these issues? So how can people interact with you in a way who are watching this and might want to help and join your efforts? How can they do that? Where can they get hold of you?
I have two organizations that I work with for promoting human rights in China. So Humanitarian China, we provide for political prisoners in China. These are the people who risked everything, some serving prison terms as long as like 23 years in prison now. They are the future leaders if China is to be democratized. These are our own hardware, for example, for China. So we need to support these people, and we like to get financial support from our account. If you go to Humanitarian China, there's a website, a very simple website with donation possibilities. Of course, I mean, I love talking to people. You feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook. It's very easy to search my name and find me. Send me an email. I love to talk to people if this is something you care about, and we can figure out the best way for people to contribute.
Well, I will be one of those people contributing, and
thank you, Jeff.
I want to thank you for your appearing here today with me and having this conversation. I want to thank you for the inspiration you provide as a role model for people who have who have taken a risk for a cause and a principle that more of us need to look up to and be inspired. And as I said, you're the bravest person I've met. Not that there are not other brave people out there, because I'm sure there are a lot of brave people out there. But to meet somebody who, under those circumstances, took the risk that you took to not only just be there, but to be one of the leaders in organizing this effort. It's just it's an amazing story, and it's an honor and a privilege to have met you and had this conversation with you, and to have future conversations with you. So
thank you. I'm very humbled. I'm glad we have met, and we can talk like this. I hope we can talk more in the future. And of course, I love this country for providing me with this sanctuary and freedom. And I hope we can bring in more freedom to this country as well. And at least we should defend what we have together. Thank you.
Great last words. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.